Welcome, friends. Greetings. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Just want to show you my face and say hello to all those who are actually watching. Regardless of what platform you're on, I just want to say hello, show you my full face before I put on my PPE and we really get started with this forecast. Because as you can tell, there is a pretty strong glare of the light coming off the screen into my blue blocking glasses. So I'm just going to minimize myself now so as not to be too distracting for myself and for those of you who are watching. So welcome to this full moon forecast. We're going to talk about the main astrological themes for all signs, not breaking down each sign, but do a general read of the full moon in Gemini, which actually has already happened, meaning we are still in our full moon phase for the next day or so, up to the next new moon, which is on December 30th, and that will be in the sign of Capricorn. So, but for the time being, we're going to talk about some themes related to this full moon. We're going to talk about the main transits that are going to be happening over the next 2 weeks and break it down. I have a personal story that I want to share in true Sagittarius fashion as a storyteller and a weaver of tales, so to speak. Sagittarius, if you know people who are Sag, I am a stellium in Sag. Sagittarius sun in as well, and Sagittarius people are definitely storytellers. They love to tell a story. They love to weave together a narrative, and tend to be very philosophical and a lot wisdom. I wouldn't say necessarily keepers, although that could be the case, but just people who strive for understanding. And this actually is balanced out. It can be balanced out by Gemini, which is where this full moon is. So we have a lot of these themes going on with this whole lunar cycle, right? Because it started with a Sag new moon in a conjunction to Antares, and now we come to this mutable full moon, this Gemini full moon. And so we're going to look at the astronomy software, look in the connections of where this full moon is in relation to other fixed stars and the constellations. But also, too, I made a point to draw out as many starseed identified folks as possible with this particular forecast. Now, I will say, and I put it in the title of the video, that this is the Orion Starseed's time to shine for sure with this full moon. And I'll go into all the specifics of why I even came to that conclusion, just in case you're confused. But for those of you who know already that you're an Orion Starseed, none of this is probably going to be news to you. But truly, the themes that I'm going to be bringing up with this full moon, and truly the difficult transits that are going to be happening the rest of the lunar cycle. I mean, the big ones are mostly all squares and oppositions. And then today, the sun is in, along with the full moon, which is in itself an opposition. The sun is in an inconjunct or a quincunx to Uranus in Taurus. So there is a lot of difficult energy, and the full moon is bringing to fruition all of those seed point intentions that we set with the new moon. So they've come to fruition. We have a really very bright and illuminated sense of what that feels like, the totality, and then we adapt to what that is as the rest of the lunar cycle, the light wanes, right? And so the theme here is truly about the resistance that allows us to demonstrate our capacity to transcend it, right? Without resistance, without the opposition, without the contention, whatever it is in your life, there is no opportunity to synthesize those things and create something new, which is really the essence of the Sagittarian energy. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to really lean into that resistance, skate along it, much like the Peanuts characters here in this thumbnail are skating along the ice. Through all of the squares that I'm going to talk about going through the next 2 weeks. There'll be lots of opportunity to utilize this contention, and one of the main traits, one of the more beneficial traits of Orion Starseed folks is this capacity to not be diffused, or well, that certainly can happen if there's a lot of Pisces, late Pisces in your chart too, along with this, but not to become discouraged or to give up or to be diffused in any way by opposition or contention. Orion starseeds utilize this resistance as a means to practice, to build their skill, to gather more information, knowing that it is knowledge and information and curiosity that eventually leads to wisdom and understanding. You know, the real spiritual alchemy that is represented by Sagittarius in the ninth house. So the next 2 weeks, plenty of opportunity. If you are an Orion starseed, of course, this is going to be like where you can really tap into those skill sets and make the most out of whatever is creating entropy or is established entropy, you know, some sort of chaos, quote unquote, in your life, because it's the friction between these two things that catalyzes a chemical reaction. That's what the chemical or the alchemy of the ninth house in Sagittarius is about. So some good news along with this is that Mercury, the ruling planet of Gemini, which is where our full moon was exact, Mercury stationed direct along with this full moon. So granted, it is in its weakest position in Sagittarius. It is in its opposite territory. So things move swiftly, right? Think of that Eight of Wands when you were talking about Mercury and Sagittarius. Things move swiftly. Now, right now, Mercury is stationed, meaning that it seems like it's sitting still as it is preparing to move the other direction. And I use the air quotes because that's not really happening. It's just an illusion based on relative nature of speed and distance and where we all are in our orbits with the sun. So Mercury looks like it's standing still, and eventually it's going to start moving back in its prograde. It'll be moving with us forward, and it'll start picking up momentum. So that's on its way. And in Sagittarius, it's not about knowledge and information and communication so much as it is the inspiration. It is the purpose and meaning that is derived from the contention or the polarity or the friction of opposition. If there is no frozen water, there is no skating over the surface. So, and it's about rising above that rigid and cold type of resistance. And like I said, Orion Starseeds, this is your opportunity to really step forward as like, yeah, this is my wheelhouse, you know? So I'll talk a little bit more about Orion Starseed traits, general traits. And of course, if you've had the reading with me, then you already know this about yourself. And maybe this is just a really good reminder to be like, oh yeah, that's a big part of how I manage this area of my life, right? And that has a lot to do with knowing your astrology. So, always a good reason to get a reading, just so you can start understanding this temporal map, of course. So, but all star seeds, I think that's why I also kind of wanted to rope in all star seeds this conversation. And of course, there are other markings that are really prevalent right now, especially where Uranus is sitting, pretty much with the Pleiades, and Mars is sitting right with the Beehive cluster. These are also these starseed locations, but it's the Orion starseeds that are really with this full moon, and of course just the rest of this lunar cycle. I think can really make the most of this and be a teacher in some ways, right? So, but all star seeds, I think, it's important now for people who really identify with this abstraction of what is otherwise not really you can't really wrap your rational human mind around what a soul is. Really, it's just something it's something we experience, and we know that it's has many opportunities to come into form and to incarnation, have experiences. And that's we look at the nodes of the moon, and that's a whole other conversation right now. That's something that I'm going to cover in the solstice report, the seasonal forecast. I'm going to put that out very, very soon, because the nodes of the moon are going to shift into Neptune and Virgo, and there's going to be a very distinct shift in the trajectory of the soul currently, all of us, and where it's taking us. So that's something to talk about with longer cycles. So, but for now, in terms of all star seeds. I'm going to share, before I launch into the technical aspects, we're going to look at the astronomy software, like I said, the fixed stars, some of the information around the constellations. This is more sidereal astrology. Of course, we'll look at the next 2 weeks in terms of Western astrology, what all the transits are, and give an idea of like, okay, these days, might be more challenging than other days. Remember back to this full moon, what was kind of highlighted for all of us is that, in order to really experience the good fortune of, coming home to yourself, you have to actually experience and master the contention, whatever it is within yourself, within your environment. So, but I do want to share, just kind of my personal experiences along, strangely enough, the UAP phenomenon, the area of kind of the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area that I had my most profound experience in. Just make a few connections, to get your wheels turning if they haven't already around some of the sightings that are happening in the state of New Jersey. And the reason I want to share that is, just to kind of get your brain considering all of the options of what could be going on and be prepared as if you identify as a starseed, being prepared to really make the most of those. Magenta Pixie refers to it. It's the best way I could also describe it. The cellular memory cascade, right? It's the frequency that's coming off of the frequency that is our DNA, that's picking up all the iterations of our soul's journeys through incarnation after incarnation. And there's something starseed related that is going to really, I think, be very important in terms of managing our expectations, managing our responses, managing ourselves really in relation to what is transpiring in terms of all of these sightings. So I'm going to bring up the software, the astronomy software first, just so you have something really nice to look at. And I'm going to share my my experience, my UAP experience. And from there, we'll kind of start launching into the specifics. So, yeah, get cozy for just a moment, and I'll share with you. And I've had plenty, right? There's a lot of different experiences that are for me and for me alone. Things that come through in different states of awareness, right? A lot of dream time kind of contact, and I think a lot of us have that, especially starseed people. And you have all had your own experiences and your own understandings of these phenomena in your life. So, and some people they have experiences that are not welcomed, and that they experience fear, or they're uneasy, or it's non-consensual, or it kind of spans the spectrum. I don't have an active memory of anything like that, although I had a lot more fearfulness and sleep paralysis when I was a child, that when I started taking my energetic and spiritual boundaries a lot more seriously and developed some practices, that started to go away. So I haven't had that issue in a really, those issues in a really long time. So, but I have had experiences since then that have kind of blown my mind. So here's the experience that's relevant to the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. So now, and there are other experiences in that general time period that were also along these lines that are, like I said, they're for me only. So, but just know that there was kind of a stack up of experiences that would fit into this general category going on from 2014, 15 up through, definitely up through what I'm about to tell you, which was 2021. It was June of 2021. It was, strangely enough, it was a full moon along the Sagittarius Gemini axis, and the full moon was The full moon was, so it was the opposite because it was in June. It was June 5th. And so the full moon was eclipsed. It was a total lunar eclipse of a Sagittarius full moon, and the sun was in Gemini. Actually, it was, I believe, the sun was in a conjunction with Rigel, which is the front foot of the Orion constellation. If you were to look at the screen and look at the Orion constellation, here's Rigel down here. It's that front foot forward. And we've talked about this in past forecasts, and I've talked about it in the weeklies to the subscriber base. So this was a total lunar eclipse. It was along this axis, but opposite Sagittarius and Gemini. But the full moon, the eclipse full moon was Sagittarius. Right now, our full moon is Gemini. And as you can see on this, on the screen here, the full moon is actually in the constellation of Auriga, the charioteer. And there's many bodies of work that talk about fixed star astrology and constellations. And I'm going to share just a tiny bit because there's something about this charioteer energy in relation to these sightings that really struck me. And with the full moon here, and what it represents in terms of a Sabian symbol, I do feel like that these experiences are part of the contention of this full moon. So even if it's in terms of our own minds, like challenging our own conceptions, our ideas, what we think we know, and how it provides resistance in our own minds and consciousness. So we'll get there. Back to my story. So on June 5th of this eclipse, I am flying from Portland, where I had lived the previous 15 years, flying back to Pennsylvania, which is my home state. I had not intended to stay, which is what ended up happening, but at the time spent a long-term visit throughout the summer. My dad's brother had passed away in March. That first wave of like COVID deaths and the lockdown when it started in March, he passed away very suddenly. So it was very devastating for my immediate family, obviously. And so I also was in transition already in terms of catalyst that had already started, and we had not intended to leave Portland at that point before COVID. So, but then this happened, and I was in a transition period. Like I wasn't working actively anymore because I'd chosen to make a transition into starting to do this work. And so that was what I was doing. I was practicing astrology. I was doing readings. I was starting to make videos, and I decided to come back to Pennsylvania. The day that I flew back, I was asked to stay in my uncle's empty house for about a week to quarantine, which I was just like, I will do whatever appeases my parents. Even at that point, I was just like, this is unnecessary, but I will do it. And I had my own reasons for doing it, because the house that my uncle had lived in actually was my dad and him. It was their childhood home. And then when their parents had passed away finally, my uncle, he was the middle of three boys, my dad's younger brother, he had bought out the other two brothers, my dad and then the youngest, and then bought out and moved into the house, and it was his house. So and I grew up in that town, which is in Bucks County and right on the other side of Trenton, New Jersey, right? Very, very close. So I flew in. This was the same time where things were erupting in different cities around the U.S. In 2021 and catching on fire, if you know what I mean. So this was like a really intense time for me to be leaving Portland, showing up in this environment by myself, quarantining in this house that I had spent my childhood in. That there was so much connected to what was happening. So that in itself was really intense. So one of the evenings I was on my Facebook, and I happened to be following a certain person on Facebook who was just had a lot of, I guess you could call them a truther, but they were also very much into the spiritual aspect of the Matrix, and also just a lot of themes that were starting to coalesce inside my own head at that point. And so, I would follow their stuff on Facebook, and I'd be like, that's really interesting. And a lot of it was over, it was just very, I don't want to say it was very technical, but it was. And then one evening, this particular person said she made a post and she was like, if you step outside at this time on this evening, you may get some type of contact experience. I don't remember how she phrased it, but it was something to that effect. And I was thinking, like, okay, well, what else am I doing? I'm here by myself in this empty home, full of memories from multiple generations, and I'm like also leaving Portland behind, and all of these things are erupting. And I was like, fine, I'll go outside, thinking that I would look up and I might see something. I really had no expectation, but I was curious. I left myself open to the experience, but I was just like, whatever. It could be just like a weird twinkle in the sky, or who knows? Because that's certainly stuff. I've seen stuff like that all the time that defied what was supposed to be happening. So I go outside on the back deck, and it's summertime, so it's really hot and humid, and I'm just chilling, and I'm looking up, and I'm, just being very, very mellow and stargazing, basically. It's real quiet in this neighborhood. And all of a sudden, I start to hear this sound that just got louder and louder and louder, coming up from over, over I guess, the horizon. It got so loud that it sounded like the largest freight train I'd ever heard in my life. I never had heard anything. Now, mind you, this is at the time that this person made this, said go outside, and at this time, which is like 10:45 in the evening or something really kind of specific, there may be an opportunity for you to have contact with a ship, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. So this time was approaching, and this sound just got louder and louder and louder. And then all of a sudden, I didn't see them, but I could hear them. I knew what they were. These two craft that were like jet engines buzzed my house, the house I was in, like the backyard. Like, there is no way that they couldn't have been, more than like only 100 feet off of the ground. You know what I mean? Like, I felt them and I heard them. It was so loud that I thought the world was ending. I didn't know what was happening. And then they buzzed right by, and that was over. And I was just like floored, right? Completely floored that this had happened, especially at this time. And this person said this, and I was like, wow. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. And considering everything else happening around, so if you were to go, now I'm just going to give you a couple dots for you to connect. That's my personal story, okay, of this event. Um, and they were definitely fuel engines. They were the loudest thing I'd ever heard. And I know that jet engines have these outrageously loud, they're outrageously loud. They're too loud, right? And they shouldn't be flying that low, but they were. Um, I was just, yeah, I was like, whoa. I mean, I don't know if this is an alien, but it's certainly something it's probably a UAP of something. Like, they're not supposed to be flying that low. Can they even fly that low? I don't even think that's safe. But maybe it was like hypersonic. You know what I mean? So fast forward to now and all these sightings in this area. So there's a couple dots I want you to connect. So first of all, that particular area, I'll tell you exactly where it is. It's in Bucks County. It's a town called Newtown. So if you want to get on a map and start looking at these places, you'll see how in close proximity they are. The other thing I would recommend looking up is, of course, where these sightings are happening currently, but also I would recommend looking up McGuire Air Force Base. That's an interesting one. Look up McGuire Air Force Base and what's going on, where it is. And then I would recommend that you look up the subject of the Pine Barrens Forest in New Jersey. And if you really want to get into the weeds on this one, then you could do a search for Pine Barren Forest paranormal. I would not do UFO, even though there may be stuff from the past that is connected to that, but you won't get anything but what's currently happening if you type that in. At least that was my experience. So typing in Pine Barrens, New Jersey, paranormal, haunted forest, go down that rabbit hole and make those connections. But I would encourage you to look at them on a map and then find out where these sightings are happening in the general area. And, maybe there's some connections there you could just make on your own. But it does connect to my personal story that you know, look at where Newtown is, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, right? Look at how close in proximity it is to, I don't know, McGuire Air Force Base. Um, and how did someone know, like down to the minute, that, I would, who knows, right? Like I don't have an explanation, but I do have a bunch of data points that are correlated pretty strongly. So this is why I think all star seeds, regardless of what starseed origins you do have, I think this is the time to really that your discernment about what's going on and how it may affect you, even your own mental process, even what you know, what you think you know, how you gather information and how you process it and what you do. How does that lead to wisdom? I think that these are all important. I think these are all really important processes for all of us right now, but especially star seeds, because it's not just tech, although it is, but I do feel like there is an unknown element that is woven into all of this. And I mean unknown to the officialdom aspect, that why are the pine barrens like traditionally, like what's actually going on naturally in these areas, or maybe unnaturally in these areas that seem to correspond to this type of activity. And this is all over the world. There are hot spots, quote unquote, but the pine barrens in New Jersey definitely are hot spots, and or is a hot spot, and I think it's just worth considering. Okay, so let's start getting into the more technical aspects of this week's or this full moon forecast. So as you can see on the Stellarium, by the way, Stellarium as a software, which is like a planetarium software and has all these features, is free to download. So you just need enough space on your device in order to do it. There is a mobile version as well, and then you can have access to your own astronomy software and look at planets, exoplanets. You can look at stars, you can look at constellations, you can follow the progression of things any point on the Earth. It's got all these settings. So that's what we're using right now, Stellarium. And as you can see, the moon is in the front knee of Auriga, or the charioteer. And when I talk about Orion star seeds, and we're talking about Western astrology, which is the dome that we see as us standing at the center is an equal 360-degree circle, and then each degree is making up one of those 360 degrees, and 0 degrees is measured at the vernal equinox. That's how the ecliptic is measured out in Western astrology. So that's the full moon is at 23 to 24 degrees, which is actually on Orion's belt. So, but it's longitudinally, if that makes sense, it's longitudinally lined up, the full moon is. So in sidereal astrology, which is more about where are things in actual relationship to other fixed stars, everything's dynamic and in motion, it's pretty much conjunct this star in the Auriga constellation. So I wanted to read a little bit about this full moon in terms of this aspect, give some background and just give you some ideas here, because again, the charioteer, not the chariot, the charioteer, the figure that is driving the chariot, that is piloting the chariot, is, well, the whole constellation has its own set of traits that are associated with it. And then that particular star that the moon is has its own set of traits as well. And I just want to go into, so you can go to astrologyking.com and you can get all of this information on all of the fixed stars and the constellations. And it cites all these different sources that talk about the stars from an ancient astrology position. So Auriga is the charioteer, right? And it has there are these ancient astrologers would attribute qualities from the planets to these fixed stars. And so Ptolemy would say that the constellation has the bright stars are like Mars and Mercury. So of course Mars and Mercury right now, let me bring up Yeah, Mars and Mercury right now are both well, Mars is retrograde and Mercury is now direct, but there is this sense of motion or movement, and especially with Mercury, mutability, and then Mars, of course, being the ruler of Aries and Scorpio. There's cardinal and fixed energy. There's just more masculine energy associated with both of these energies. So the other thing about it's said, okay, the constellation is said to give self confidence, interest in social problems, happiness, um, and maybe being a teacher or having or bringing young people, like being a mentor. Now in the Kabbalists associated this constellation to the devil card, which I thought was a really interesting connection, considering it's the goat itself. And you can see that, oh, I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can bring it up here. I don't think you can. You can see that Auriga is actually holding a goat, and it's a big part of this constellation as well as the charioteer. There's some weird imagery that's going along here. So it is a very fortunate constellation, but it it shows that there's honors, like military honors and honors in political endeavors, and there's all this imagery about the charioteer. It's really sticking out to me in terms of all of these quote unquote drone sightings, and what could be going on now that it's kind of reached a crescendo here with this full moon, and having this full moon be like in that alignment with Orion as well. Let me see here. Now listen to this. This is coming from astrologyking.com. I'm not entirely sure where this is cited from, but it says the charioteer lifts his team from ocean and rests his wheels up from the downward slope of the horizon, where icy Boreas lashes us with his bitter blasts. Lifts his team from ocean. Now, if you are paying attention at all, what's happening in terms of these sightings, then you know that there have been reports from people, which I think, like police officers, I believe, or maybe like local news journalists, saying that they're seeing like 50 drones coming out of the ocean, like coming out of the water. So there's just the fact that it says the charioteer lifts his team from ocean. He will impart his own enthusiasms and the skills still retained in heaven, which as driver of a chariot he once took pleasure in on earth, right? It's very interesting, lifting the team from the ocean. But ultimately, this particular constellation does have much more of a positive. He might be driving. He's the charioteer. He's driving the chariot, but he's kind of holding the goat, and there is a sense of being, non-threatening, right, and able to it's like a shepherd. That's what I'm trying to get at. And so there's a charioteer and the shepherd energy that goes along with this Auriga, and the fact that the full moon is happening here right at the front knee, the knee that is brought forward. So I encourage you to look up. There's not exactly a starseed origin at this particular star or from this particular constellation. I've never read one, or it's never come up that there are star seeds from any of these areas. It doesn't mean that there aren't. It's just that I don't have the I don't have the information, and it's never really brought itself to my awareness, right? But he's the great shepherd, and even in Hebrew, the Hebrew root, which means a shepherd. Interesting. It's a constellation of 66 stars. Oh, that's very interesting too. Huh. So I just wanted to bring that up just because that is where the full moon is happening, like right there in that constellation, and is, as you can see here, is in alignment with Orion. And it's particularly on Orion's belt, which, is his protection, right? It holds everything together, and it provides protection around the most vulnerable area as well. So we don't need to look at that part anymore. So I'm going to bring just the chart up right now. So I'm curious what people have, if you have any experience with more of the sidereal astrology with Auriga, if it's ever come up in your awareness, or you've worked with it at all. I'm really curious. What comes up for you when you think of the charioteer or the shepherd? Especially, knowing that the Sabian symbol for this full moon is, these children skating across the village frozen village pond, just like in this thumbnail. 24 degrees Sagittarius is the bluebird that's perched, on the gate in front of the cottage. And that has a very specific connotation of good fortune, right? And and a reward. And we talked about this at the beginning, that this energy of this whole lunar cycle does present the opportunity for some sort of quote unquote reward or good fortune. And our capacity to use these inhibiting circumstances, whatever they are, for the development of our character, is how we actually get to the reward, right? Our efforts at integrating into our social environment, right? The binding situations that provide the resistance that make us do better, right? Make us learn more, to develop our, a rational mind further, right? I mean, to communicate more, right? To learn more. That's the Gemini energy. So the use of inhibiting circumstances. Now, again, this is an Orion starseed trait for anybody who already knows about it. You know that this is like your wheelhouse, right? Orion starseeds are masters at debate, because their capacity, then, being an Orion starseed, you're not, and I should say we, because there's a lot of us, right? And I know I have it too. It's really strong in my draconic chart, which is the oversoul, right? It's the soul, the blueprint of your soul before coming into incarnation. The natal chart is your soul coming into a personality, right? And how you're going to work with that through this lifetime. But there is a draconic chart, which is your soul as is before coming into this set of circumstances or this new blueprint. And I have a ton of Orion at that level. So, those inhibiting circumstances are exactly what pushes the Orion starseed person to learn more, to the point where you're not afraid of information that challenges you. So you actually use that challenge when you hear something that really challenges you, and you're just like, I feel that resistance. You just lean into it. You're like, I'm going to learn as much about the opposing viewpoint as about the viewpoint that I want to support, which makes you a master of debate. Sometimes Orion starseeds can be very, they cannot be very sensitive emotionally when they are imparting information, right? Because it's so just objective and kind of cold, but it's also very coming from that third chakra, right? There's a lot of willpower and confidence there, of just like, no, this is just facts, right? Facts don't care about your feelings. And an Orion starseed, that is the truth. And it's the use of these inhibiting circumstances that develop our character. We transcend the challenges in our environment, and that's how we reach this, the bluebird, right? The good fortune, because the bluebird represents that, is spiritually and like a totem animal and stuff. And so, but we have to face that resistance. We have to maintain our own integrity at the same time. We have to also integrate into our environment, whatever it is. And we learn this kind of rhythmic freedom by using these situations. They're very binding, to demonstrate our capacity for self-mobilizing, right? Like, we're not going to, just because this inhibiting circumstance is presenting itself doesn't mean that we can't find a way to enjoy it and skate along it. And that's really what this full moon, to me, is all about. And that, like I said, there'll be plenty of opportunity over the next 2 weeks as we have to hold this frequency through our conscious mind and our conscious intention, as the light of the moon wanes away. So our emotions, they don't get any less intense. They don't get, especially as the moon is about to move into Cancer today, they don't get any less intense. It's just we don't have our it's not as illuminated right now. It's very illuminated, this dynamic and this way of adapting to the world around us. So it's just so interesting that, and of course, Mercury is direct now. Mercury ruling Gemini, moving direct. I mean, things are going to happen very quickly once Mercury starts to really get moving. Right now, it's kind of at a standstill as it's preparing to go prograde, but it's going to be swift, right? It's going to, the mind's going to follow. It's like having that we have a wood stove, so I interact with this fire on a pretty much consistent basis right now, and it burns down to coals, and then but you provide a little bit of wind or the bellows, and that shit shoots right back up, especially if the coals are really really hot, right? It's not something that you have to work at. And Mercury, as much as we want to keep processing information, and Jupiter in its retrograde right now in Gemini has us being very conservative about that process, in terms of the big picture. But Mercury stationing direct, there's gonna be like flashes of insight. There's gonna be just kind of things will happen because they've already they'll already have happened. We'll just become aware of it. That's a big part of like the Eight of Wands and Mercury direct. So that's also happening along with this full moon. So let's start looking at some of the resistance that's going to present itself over the course of the next 2 weeks, because it's a lot of big squares. There's going to be a lot of red on this chart, as you're going to see. So let me bring up the next big one. Now, like I said, the moon moves through Cancer now over the next couple of days. So today's the 15th. So Monday into Tuesday the 17th. And when we get to the 18th, this is the next big set of squares. Now, before I launch into this in particular, one thing I will say is that not only is it the full moon, which is this moon and the sun in opposition, but the sun at the same time is today on the 15th in a inconjunct or a quincunx to Uranus. Now, these quincunxes are like square pegs in round holes, as I've talked about, and other people describe it differently. They are things that don't fit in, on the surface. They don't fit. You can't just keep forcing them to fit. It requires an adjustment of some sort. So that adjustment can come from a lot of different areas. But when we're talking about Uranus, usually this adjustment is something that is coming out of nowhere, or it's new, or it's exciting, it's positive change, especially when the sun is involved, right? And there's a yearning for something new or exciting, and there is positive change and exciting opportunities. And I think a lot of people kind of are feeling this or seeing this, or things they didn't necessarily expect are popping up, but they're kind of pleasant surprises. There's a lot of anticipation and a sense of really identifying with where things can go, and a very passionate sense of kind of emulating that, right? We want to enjoy and we anticipate where things are going, and we can kind of like identify with that and identify with what that feels like, what the actions are. And the Sabian symbol for 25 Sagittarius is, it's like a chubby boy on a rocking horse, right? It's just like, one day I'll be a man, but right now I'm just a chubby little boy on a rocking horse, right? But the individual is emulating these patterns and these rhythms that'll be real power down the road, right? With growth and stuff. The thing with it's the quincunx to Uranus is it kind of like triggers this, like, I want it to change, you're kind of yearning for that new. Maybe you're tired of being just emulating. Maybe you're ready to actually offer and to give. It just might be unexpected. Now, the wording here says you may come under pressure to make changes, perhaps from a government agency, a superior, or an unexpected event. So I do feel like that is also, when you talk about Uranus, and it's especially because it's in conjunction with the Pleiades, I would definitely say that there's this element here about some sort of upgrade, some sort of the new tech, just a new frame of reference in terms of our society as well. And certainly what is objective reality. When we're talking about Taurus, we're talking about what we can see, smell, touch, taste, hear, right? What are our and what we can feel energetically. I put all of those things into that category of objective reality here. And things change very suddenly with Uranus in this realm. So it can be very mind expanding, and we can kind of like really tap into our imagination of like, oh, tapping into this power or this kind of anticipatory enjoyment of the power that comes with, there's a lot of optimism with Sagittarius of what we can actually, bring forward and create. So there's insight, there's higher awareness to make these things happen. I do see like there's just kind of like, oh, inspiration and just kind of out of nowhere. But imagining a better future and anticipating change can bring insecurity, uncertainty, and fear. And I do see that as well. You may experience instability, irritability, and a crisis of indecision. And along with this full moon and the need to use that inhibiting circumstance, I would say that, it's okay to have that crisis of indecision, and but not let it lead to that irritability and that sense of fear and instability, knowing that it's that back and you can only ping pong back and forth so much before the energy forces you into an alchemical response, a transformation. And so that comes, and that's gonna, there's enhanced creativity, originality, right? There can be some real kind of, inspiration to make change and be open-minded for, something new and something different, right? With all that Uranus energy. Doing something slightly different could get better results than attempting a radical change. That's something else, considering Taurus and the Uranus is retrograde in Taurus. It doesn't have to be these massive changes. It could be these micro things that are, just tweaks in your reality, tweaks in your resources, tweaks in what what your material, storehouse, right? And that can mean anything. A tweak in, things like traditions and habits are very Taurus, and second house. So being too daring, being too impulsive, being too unpredictable or rebellious can mean you must start over. Remember, it's a little chubby boy in a rocking horse. He is definitely not ready to step into what he is envisioning for himself. And I think that that's the other thing too, is we don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? There's the charioteer energy again. So being too daring, and too rebellious, which is easy for Uranus, absolutely. It'll be difficult to undo the changes later if you're kind of like being led around. Like I said, I think we have to be the charioteer of our situation. But on the other side of it is, if you stubbornly resist the change or become arrogant or disruptive, you could damage things, your prospects and your position. So these quincunxes always require an inner adjustment. Sometimes there's a wild card that kind of comes up, but along with the full moon and the Mercury retrograde today, I just, it can be very one of those days where you're just like, you know what, like it's time for change. And I can identify within myself where it's going, and I can really be emboldened and inspired by how it feels, where it's going, but also to keep in mind that you don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? We have to still remain the charioteer of our experience here. And that full moon really suggests that we use those binding experiences, the resistance, right? And that's what is, that's what's created when you're holding the reins of something, right? There is resistance between you stabilizing and managing that which is charging forward. So again, charioteer. Now on the 18th is when the sun squares Neptune. So what day of the week is this here? This is the 18th is what, Wednesday? I believe it's Wednesday. Yes, it's Wednesday. So then we start getting into our first real you know what I mean. Sorry, this is really annoying. There we go. Our first real square, Sun square Neptune, which is basically just like takes the, it just kind of diffuses everything. Confusion, disappointment, right? Insecure, feeling guilty. There's a lot of disillusionment. because you're only seeing the best in people with a sun square Neptune. Now remember, Neptune is direct now, right? The smoke and mirrors are fully engaged. The movie projectors turn back on. The lights are low. The fog machine's on, right? We're like, ooh, we're in the midst of the woo, right? With Neptune direct now in these late degrees of Pisces, which, by the way, is in a square to Orion and the Gemini degrees in Orion. So this is a place where the Orion starseeds really struggle, and is in these late degrees of Pisces, especially because there is no resistance in which to work against, right? And that can be like, oh, where do I go? And where do I end and anything else begins, right? And then you just, all your momentum, or all your gusto, or all of that use of inhibiting, you just melt into whatever's around you. So it can weaken your vitality, Sun square Neptune, like this. Especially hard work, right? It's really hard to get motivated. So these next couple of days during the full moon period, because we'll still be in the full moon phase even up to this point, I feel like is like, okay, you can use the resistance. You're feeling into this ability to use these inhibiting circumstances. It leads you to your good fortune to be able to transcend these situations. And then the Sun square Neptune comes along, and it's just like, yeah, well, what you've been doing is, do you really need, is this really still is this belief system, or this understanding, or these set of principles, right? They're still in constant use? Can you even find that? What is that? It's an old bridge over a stream that's, it's like an old cover bridge that everybody still uses, right? I just feel like the Neptune is just like the fog's going to roll in. It's like, I can't even find this bridge. I can't even find the opening, let alone go through it. So there's a lot of confusion and weakening of vitality. Hypochondria becomes an issue when the Sun squares Neptune like this. It's not ideal if you're going to get tests or even like surgeries or procedures, because you're just weakened and your recuperative powers just are compromised with a Sun square Neptune. Things become challenging to diagnose, or there are misdiagnoses, and people become very sensitive. They become very paranoid. And become even more sensitive to the ways that the ways that we all self-medicate. I would really caution people if they struggle with consumables and addictions. That just came up, it's been coming up in readings too. I would say to just be very aware that a Sun square Neptune makes it even more of a problem, right? Now, there's deceptive influence with Sun square Neptune. Really, people take advantage. So you have to be above board in all your dealings. Make sure that you know exactly what you're getting into. And personal relationships can be subject to dishonesty and deception. And secrets will be harder to keep. And at the same time, more challenging to uncover. Isn't that weird? Creativity and imagination, because you can't lock it down when Neptune is direct, especially in Pisces, right? The truth is out there, but it's also obfuscated pretty strongly by all the smoke and mirrors, right? And again, you can apply this to many different things that seem to be happening out on the world stage. The good news is that right after this, leading up to our solstice, which, by the way, this time period has a solstice and it has Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, which are going to be probably the most challenging, I think, in terms of transits. But at least we have Venus trine Jupiter, which is a very lovely, very social energy coming forward on the 19th as we're leading up to our solstice. And the moon and Chiron are in a trine, so that's really nice too. Let me bring this up to where it needs to be. All right. So that you can see it. So this Venus trine Jupiter. This is an air trine. Venus has been in Aquarius for a hot minute. And again, this is Orion energy starting to come into play here. So when Venus and Jupiter in their trine, it's, it's very optimistic. It's a lot of good, cheerful energy. Kind of great for holiday gathering, right? And very looked forward to. These are both benefic planets, so they have a quality of beneficence. And so when they're in a very structured, not in a square, but a trine, it's very foundational and supportive. When they're together, it's a very looked forward to transit, especially when it comes to love and it comes to camaraderie and it comes to socializing and communication with all of these air energies, and especially Aquarius, about humanity as a whole. It makes you seem more attractive and allows you to relax, express your personality more, and be more affectionate and welcoming. I think this again. There's an exchange of knowledge. Maybe it's more personal, right? Maybe it's just you and that loved one that you feel really close to. Just exchanging information and like really sharing words, sharing thoughts, sharing data, sharing just affection, like it says, with each other. And that brings a lot of good cheer and love and optimism. This is a really nice transit. Excellent time for dating, right? Mending stressful relationships, wonderful. And honestly, socializing of all kinds is very favored with Venus trine Jupiter. Again, it may be a little bit more on the conservative side with, smaller gatherings. Jupiter is retrograde. Perhaps it is, you know, uh, more mellow conversation, not as expansive and boisterous as Jupiter can be. And you get more fun out of things and adventurous activities too. It's a perfect time for starting a holiday because of your relaxed and stress-free state. And we're in the holiday season, right? So shopping is favored. It's a great time. People definitely going to be shopping. Gifts and compliments are offered a lot with a Venus trine Jupiter, and you would be wise to accept any requests during this transit because it comes back around very easily, right? And again, there's a lot of about exchanging knowledge, exchanging information, really kind of just bringing our information together. And again, this is a great Orion Starseed energy that is a little bit more social, less kind of adversarial. Sometimes it can be very just like, no, this is the facts. I was visiting with someone yesterday and we were just talking about all kinds of stuff, and this person, we both agreed that, like, and we both work very much with the public in a very one-on-one type of setting, in terms of providing a service. And we both kind of, and with our family members as well, we've both kind of come to this state where we're just like, I don't really push, I don't even offer the information anymore to people. It's if they ask about it or they want to know my opinion or they request information, I feel like that then I'll share things, but I've really stopped sharing. And this type of energy does kind of favor a little bit more transparency or a willingness for people to really share information, but it's in a way that is what it puts first forward. What is it prioritizes is the relationship with the person and what it brings out, right? It's the two lovebirds sitting on a fence, right? And this is why it's a great energy for dating and socializing over the holidays. But there's this, because that relationship is the priority, then there is this ability to really share and information and get an objective approach, have an objective approach to discussing subjective experiences, but the priority is the relationship. And I think that this is very necessary as we're about to go into not only the solstice and, of course, the third quarter moon, which is going to be a Libra Capricorn square. And of course, third quarter moon is a crisis in consciousness. Of course, you can see that more squares, even a grand square, it's faint, but it's still very much here with Saturn and Jupiter and the moon and Mercury. And this is really important because this square between Jupiter and Saturn is a big deal, and it's coming on Christmas Eve. So the Libra moon does square the Capricorn sun, and it's a crisis of consciousness. And the moon in Libra is like, we always just kind of want to people please because we emotionally can feel the balance or the imbalance, and we emotionally want to balance things out. With the moon in Libra like this, very people pleasing, because it is kind of a necessity for us to emotionally be able to establish some sort of social balance in our relationships, whatever they are. But the square, and really the nodes also being involved here, the nodes of the moon, the trajectory of the soul, still pulling us to Aries, which is very much about the subjective experience as the first and foremost primary experience. The seed does, in order to have a harvest, which is what Libra represents, is the harvest, right? The bringing forward of the fruits of our labors. You have to have a seed, and that's where we're being pulled in terms of the soul's trajectory right now. Anyway, the sun in Capricorn, being that it represents the solstice, it represents power, institutional power, structural power, the zenith of our destiny, right? Crisis in consciousness. Where are we putting, all the idols are getting stripped away now, because the sun coming into Capricorn really has us identifying not with just the purpose of the relationship, but the actual institutional framework that surrounds it. That is, the relationship contributes to solidifying and crystallizing. And it's important for us to remember that with the power, with great power comes great responsibility, right? With as we gather power institutionally, there's just as much of a potential to waste that power by trying to hold on to it, right? That's the 2 degrees of Capricorn. But the moon in Libra, I think, is a reminder to not let go of the transformative, transfigurative power of the coming out of the past and into the future, right? The sea at the harvest time, which is really about the death, the harvesting, the gathering in of the fruits of our labor. The seed is revealed in that moment, right? There's an awareness that there is a new cycle on its way. So those themes are really going to, it's all going to get distilled down, that we can't really separate ourselves from the experience of the, I don't want to say the destruction, but the potential for destruction, but also know that from that experience, something brand new, no matter what, something brand new will come about. And that's what this whole lunar cycle has been really about. And especially coming to this full moon, right? And the inhibiting circumstances, the binding circumstances that we utilize to get better, to get healthier, to get more adapted, to get smarter, right? To learn more, right? To gather more knowledge, knowing that eventually leads to wisdom. But the big one is on Christmas Eve, which is Jupiter and in a square to Saturn. And I really want to see, you can see the red continues to be very present in these charts. Oops, wrong day. There's just, if you need practice this next 2 weeks in terms of inhibiting and binding circumstances, you are definitely going to get it. So find the nearest Orion starseed around you if you don't have any of that or don't know anything about it, and see what they're up to, because they are making, I guarantee you, the most of this situation. So no fear, right? No fear. Because Jupiter square Saturn is going to create a lot of tension. It's going to feel like you're facing a lack of opportunity, and time, right? I feel like that there is going to be this, on one level, that there's still a valued purpose to being able to discuss things with people. But with Saturn in Pisces, especially at 15 degrees Pisces, there is a need, there's, a dress rehearsal of some sort, Ooh, on Christmas Eve too. Oh man. Now, this square is going to be building before the 24th, but it is exact on the 24th. So, this type of square creates an inner tension as you face lack of opportunities, criticism, you face criticism, or limiting circumstances. Oh, that's interesting. Didn't we just talk about limiting circumstances as the theme for this full moon and how we use those, right? Your judgment may be impaired, though. Jupiter in a square to Saturn. Of many people's judgment is impaired right now. And you may experience a lack of initiative. You may become a slave to routine. That could easily happen. I see that. People just kind of, especially with Saturn and Pisces, you may find yourself completely diffused into the battle because it is around you. And you know that there is an inherent, very dangerous kind of social situation, which power is going to be used or evoked. It's here, and I think that this square may very well be kind of like an underlying kind of like that that tension, right? Structures or long held beliefs may break down, and people are going to be felt and left feeling uncertain and unsure about our future. I just feel like things are really going to keep escalating along certain lines to the point where this is going to be, on Christmas Eve. I think people are really going to be talking about what's happening, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I do feel like it is escalating, and there's more to be experienced around certain events, right? Any area of your life that gets out of control or creates this tension will require extra attention. So just know where Gemini and Pisces are in your chart so you can get a sense of where you may need to spend some extra time. This could be an experience as a financial hardship, right? Especially Saturn. Jupiter is kind of like social wealth, but Saturn is the actual like structure of the economy or of your finances as a whole. So when they're in a square to each other, I mean, you might need to limit your spending. And that's really hard when you get to Christmas because in this time of year, regardless of what you celebrate, because there is a lot of pressure to come through. So and any relationship on rocky ground may lead to a separation or a shakeup, significant shakeup with Jupiter square Saturn like this. And events may force you to reassess very strongly held, previously held strong beliefs. So you can see how this contention is going to be building and building until we get to and pass. There's always a crisis point at the quarter squares, and this is going to happen right after it. This really big square. Destructive behavior patterns such as addiction may end during this period, but with the sun in a square to Neptune, it could also be the end of people as well, which is really, it's just really sad. Excuse me, really sad. And this transit may be painful and require you to withdraw from society because maybe you need to withdraw from your addictions, right? And that keeps coming up. Like I said earlier, in other readings, it'll be a struggle and leave a vacuum in your life. It really, like that part sucks. This is why, dealing with whatever your addictions are, it's inevitable that there's a vacuum because that's what it's been filling is the void. And once you're through this stage, there will be many opportunities to fill the void with activities that are satisfactory, that are creative, right? That are healthy. And it can apply to any difficulties, right? It doesn't have to be any specific thing with this square. Long-term problem reaches a crisis point. I mean, it's going to happen on the macro and it's going to affect each of us on the micro. And there'll be a frustration and uncertainty. The next stage is a struggle where hard work and patience are required. That's part of the Saturn aspect of that perseverance, that hard work, that patience. And then you get through that, and then that determination and hard work pay off, right? And so there are possibilities as part of this square that you might experience all three stages in, the lead up, the exact moment, and then down on the other side, which is Christmas and the last week of the lunar cycle. Now, and then you have Mercury that's opposite Jupiter. You have Mercury that's in a square to Saturn coming right after that. So the opposition to Jupiter is the third of the three because of the retrograde of retrograde of Mercury. So again, there's going to be another kind of like reassessment, and this time having done all the review work of the Mercury retrograde, of what is your spirit, what is the spiritual ancestry truly, like what are we spiritually being initiated into. I think we'll have a much more direct conscious awareness of that in this opposition to Jupiter, and maybe you know, you've had plenty of time with these oppositions from Mercury to Jupiter to assess this, and this is going to be the last pass here after this major square with Saturn, right? So let's bring that up actually to show you these oppositions. So there's the opposition. It's actually in a T square. So where is that T square? Where's that ghost point? Do you know, to round out that square, to at least give us a sense of all four corners of a box that we're stuck in? Well, it's in Virgo, right? Which is woefully underrepresented even with the four main asteroids. There's nothing in Virgo except the South Node is going to be in Virgo really soon, right? The transition is going to happen very close. It's going to be after this lunar cycle, but it's in early January that transition is going to happen. So just know that momentum, that soul mastery, we're about to get that infusion of that Virgo energy propelling us forward, which is this Pisces energy, which is to our karma, right? To the woo, so to speak. But yeah, this opposition with Jupiter has got the T square involved. And so there is this sense of responsibility to, the battle we're rehearsing right now, because that is what 15 degrees of Pisces is in Sabian symbol language, right? The officer instructing the troops in a simulation with live ammunition, right? And you have this Mercury Jupiter opposition of really, again, rethinking your belief systems, whereas that, the experience of being all as one is very much so present that we kind of can't get out of it because of the Saturn aspect. We have a responsibility to it. And even if we are reconsidering our value system and beliefs, we're still kind of stuck in this pattern. And again, I think understanding the Virgo aspect of it in opposition, which is that we're part of, a root system, tapping into a root system that really stabilizes us, but also does the work to nourish us, right? That's the piece that's kind of missing out of this ghost point, and it's coming, right? That momentum from the South Node that propels us at a soul level, we're about to have that representation. And Virgo is meticulous. It's the hermit, right? It is the earth magician. It is it's not just the ideas, it's not just the casting, it's not just saying the incantation. It is about actually going into our own shadow, going into the underworld and bringing the light back out. That is the hermit's job, truly. And there's a root system there that goes back much further than any of our individual experiences, and that's something that we can, I think, tap into very soon. And we can tap into it now. I'm just saying that the South Node coming there, the South Node of the Moon, it's going to be something at a soul level that we're going to be like, oh, I've mastered this, right? So there's one more really big square that I want to draw your attention to. And of course, Mercury square Saturn, it's all part of the T square. But on the 28th is when Venus squares Uranus. And this is another, again, it just continues. Look at this. It just continues on through here, these squares that are just providing challenge after challenge. Now, 24 degrees of Aquarius, this is where Venus is. So this is a big Pleiadian and Orion activation. So if you've had oh man, that's really, hold on. Where'd you go? Here we go. And we're almost done, folks. Almost done. I don't know. I think I like the mid form, right? Not super short, but not like 4 hours long. I think an hour is a really good amount of time, to really get some in-depth information. Because you can't really, I personally can't really sum up everything so easily because there's just so much complexity to how I read astrology. So Venus in a square to Uranus. Number one, there's a big Pleiadian activation because Uranus is in conjunction with the Pleiades. Venus is in a square. It's also an Orion activation. So this has got Atlantean energy all over it and Lemurian energy, really more like that transition from the natural connection to the frequency of the planet, to being in communion with the natural energies, which is a huge Pleiadian theme, and then the Aquarius energy, which is much more about the human consciousness, the social collective consciousness, but also it's that connection to Orion, which again utilizes the mind. There is the thing about it is that the Orion energy, because it utilizes those binding circumstances, there are huge breakthroughs scientifically through the Orion starseed nature, and the Aquarian energy just takes that to the much more cosmic and almost quantum level. So Venus being here in Aquarius in this square to Uranus has got this theme overlaid, okay, of this transition and this contention and this tension and friction with the natural energies, and then the ways that the human consciousness or the more advanced consciousness comes out and is able to build off of that, to learn more, to transcend what is quote unquote natural. So, and it's all natural. It's just about how we use it. So 24 Aquarius is a man having overcome his passions teaches deep wisdom in terms of experience. Now, this has a lot to do with relationship and how the value of this constructive use, to how we use difficult past experiences to be examples, because there is a very fierce kind of warrior energy associated with this degree of Taurus, right? Total command and authority over your physical environment, your own body. It's very fierce, though. It's a warrior riding fiercely. There's a big component of the Pleiadian energy that gets stepped over all the time with this warrior energy, but it's very much here as part of the masculine part, and this is again the heart. That's our passions. Well, this square is going to have something that we don't anticipate, or something that is new or outside of the normal routine, that is going to kind of trigger this fierce warrior energy, this command and authority over ourselves, and a need to have it. Maybe it's not fully expressed because of the retrograde of Uranus, but the Aquarian energy of Venus, that has to do with, our relationships and how they feel and our senses. And again, this is a true mutual reception, because they are both in the signs of each other's rulership. So there is something here that can be balanced even in the friction. And I would say that Venus is really pointing the way to overcoming the passions and teaching that deep wisdom from our own experience. And it doesn't mean that we're not robotic or cut off necessarily, that we are tapping into that experience, that fierce experience, that passion, but overcoming it in order to communicate it, to teach. But it'll be something that kind of suddenly comes out of nowhere, or there's an increased need for freedom and excitement. You may feel confined or even bored in some ways, and you're like, I just want to step out and be able to do something with this energy. And there's just an urge for change and excitement, and you can't really bottle it up, right? But there is a constructive way to get this out, and this Venus and Aquarius energy is a big part of it. It's just that what comes out that might ignite those passions and that fierceness is something that might not be very expected and could be very sudden, okay? And this is important because right after this, as we're coming into the balsamic moon phase, of course, is the fact that Chiron, our beloved Chiron, is going to finally station direct. So this whole time that Chiron has been retrograde in Aries has been an opportunity for each of us to really work with our wounds, to be very honest with ourselves about our inner child and the wounds of our inner child, our subjective, the wounds of our subjective nature, our sense of self, self-worth, all of these Aries themes of the subjective experience. this retrograde of Chiron, we've been hopefully tending to those wounds, being really honest with ourselves, like really looking deeply into them. Because now that Chiron is going to station direct, we need to take that experience, Venus in Aquarius, right? Overcoming those passions, and tap into the superpower that has developed as a result of those wounds, and actually put them to use, right? And if you have not done that, if you are a person that has not even acknowledged that you have these self-worth issues, and you haven't, on however you do it, if you haven't at least been honest with yourself and really acknowledged it during this retrograde, you know, there's I just feel like that there's a potential for a situation to kind of force the issue once it's moving direct. But if you have been doing the work, and you are aware of your blind spots and those wounds, and you don't want to keep them open so much as teach wisdom from those experiences, then this direct nature of Chiron is going to be very impactful, in terms of how we all express our, and project ourselves really into the world, not as wounded beings, but as healed beings that can then help and assist and facilitate healing and teach other people. So it's going to be different for everyone. Of course, it's going to manifest as, major events happening out in the global stage through who knows what. I mean, it's pretty clear that there's a number of things, but the thing that has a lot of people's attention is the all of the UAP sightings and what they mean. So, observe but don't absorb. That's what I've heard from other channels. That's definitely not mine. But I like that phrase a lot. So, and know that there's the time of kind of like, we're using these inhibiting circumstances. We're really kind of leaning into and embodying this capacity to use these circumstances to transcend our own situation, because we truly are in charge. And when we do that, then we can actually overcome crisis through real compassion, not a kind of naive, innocent, like just naive and innocent, and not really aware of our own wounds where we've attempted to overcome our own crises. We've had to be developing compassion for ourselves. And if we've done that, and we've really done that work of self-love, and really cultivating self-worth and being honest with our wounds, and also, nurturing them and giving ourselves opportunities to heal, then this Chiron direct period is going to be, I think, again, really impactful. We have an opportunity to really make some impact and really actually overcome some crisis with real compassion. So I am very curious to see how this next 2 weeks goes. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling, what's going on, if any of this really resonates with you, if you have any, feedback or your own words of wisdom that you think might be beneficial to other people. Feel free to leave them in the comments section. And of course, if you're not subscribed, or if you haven't hit the like button already, please do so. It really does help the channel quite a bit, as all of us already know. Let the AI algorithm know what is valuable to you so it can reach other people, of course. And I'm going to sign off here, my friends. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other as best you can. I will be doing a seasonal forecast for the upcoming solstice. I actually really want to live stream. I haven't decided if it's going to be on Rumble or YouTube yet, just because I now have a machine. I have a computer that has the capacity to do that. So we'll see how it goes. At the very least, there will be something next weekend at the solstice, either recording, or I'll set up a live stream and we can actually interact with each other in real time. Imagine that. So, like I said, take care of yourselves, take care of each other as best you can. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. Enjoy skating on the ice. Hopefully it's not too thin where you are, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.